Well, I've said this several times before. If you just go to a hilltop and yell beer, people run from far and wide. And that's the way it's been for some time. But it really is interesting over the last several years how I guess you'd call it, popularity of beer has just ascended. And Arcadia Brewing got in early on that and has been riding that wave. And now suddenly, I don't know where the time went, celebrating 20 years in downtown Battle Creek. Tim Suprise is the chief executive at Arcadia Brewing, and he's on the line with us this morning. Good morning, Tim.
Good morning, Richard. Sorry about that earlier.
There you are. All right, good. So congratulations. Happy anniversary.
Thanks. It's been a great 20 years in the Cereal City. We're very grateful for that opportunity.
How did this all start?
Well, I think craft beer has been around for quite a while, but it certainly has increased in popularity in the last 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And we got started just based on a desire and a passion that I guess I had for wanting to create a high-quality product and to put it into a cultural kind of a entrepreneurial opportunity, if you will. And I had been traveling quite a bit throughout the United States and overseas for business prior to launching Arcadia, and became somewhat enamored by the people in the industry and the culture that they were creating. And so, as my wife points out, 20 years ago, I left a perfectly good-paying job to start a brewing company and a restaurant. And I'm thankful to be able to be talking to you 20 years later and to say that the craft beer culture is alive and well and thriving.
Yeah, it is a tremendous thing to just look back at how this thing has gotten so much lift all of a sudden. But, you know, I think beer enthusiasts were there. Somehow we just latched a bunch of people on, didn't we?
We did. And, you know, I think it's from the American craft beer scene, we're kind of returning back to our roots, if you will. You know, earlier this week, I think on December 5th, we celebrated the repeal of Prohibition. And what no one that's alive here today probably remembers, but from our history, we know that there was almost as many breweries in the United States prior to Prohibition as there is today. And that's a fact that we, I think we forget, and that for generations, the local neighborhood or community brewery was a very focal point. And so I think we are kind of circling back to a cultural renaissance, if you will, of beer and the craft element and the diversity and stylistic differences really make it very attractive, I think, to people, and to not only from a beer and a consumption perspective, but also everything that goes around with the industry and these small breweries.
All while operating in what a lot of folks refer to as a global economy. So you've got to find your niche there too, don't you?
Absolutely. And this renaissance of craft beer is obviously been very profound here in the United States, but it's happening throughout the world. And although some countries or some regions are a little bit further behind where we are here in the United States, it is, in fact, a global interest and renaissance, if you will, and I think that's good.
How do you decide how big you want to be? I mean, if it is global, do you say, well, someday we're going to be everywhere, or you just say, you know, we're going to go at our own pace?
We've chosen our own pace and a business model that puts a premium on fulfilling our potential, and that does not have any preconceived notions on size or volume. I mean, obviously, every business needs to grow and develop an increasing revenue stream and to be profitable, and we're no exception to that. But we don't have plans for world domination or to be in all 50 states or to be in 26 countries. That's not part of our model. Our model is to have sustainable growth that's measured, that's deliberate, and we want to be in the markets, both in the United States and maybe a few international markets that make sense for us, that make sense for our brand. And we'll let the volume take care of itself.
Mm-hmm. So how far along on that goal are you?
Well, it's a journey, and we continue to grow and develop. I mean, we've managed to enter and crack into a couple of the international markets recently. We just sent a container of beer over to China in November, and so that was a first for us. And we're optimistic to see how that turns into hopefully some consistent and regular business over there. And we have our eye on a couple of other markets that are strategically of interest to us. But we're just going to keep our nose to the grindstone and make the kind of improvements internally with our company to try to keep making the beer better, be a better employer, be a better community citizen, if you will. And there's lots for us to focus on in terms of our room to improve and to be a better brewery and a better restaurant.
China, that's interesting. I think some industries look at the population numbers in China and get a little seduced by that. What's the climate as it relates to beer and American beer in China? Do you get a notion that there's a real interest there?
Well, there's definitely a very significant interest. China is probably one of those markets that does have a couple of challenges, not the least being language, not so much language, but the written word. For example, translating what goes on to a beer label in English is not exactly an apples to apples translation in Chinese or in Mandarin. So there are some little quirks of doing business in some of these international markets relative to labeling and or getting the product there. But to your question, the Chinese have a really sincere interest in beer and in craft beer, and the response from our associates who were there promoting not only our product but a few other craft beer products, they had a tremendous experience and felt very, very optimistic about that market continuing to grow and being a legitimate international market for not just Arcadia, but a number of other craft brewers.
We're talking with Tim Suprise, CEO at Arcadia Brewing in Battle Creek. Take a short break and talk in a minute about how you innovate as a brewery, and we'll discuss that in just a few minutes on WBCK. A few more minutes with Tim Suprise, Chief Executive at Arcadia Brewing. So, yeah, as you say, 5 years or so has been a huge surge in interest in craft beer. How do you innovate, particularly when you've got a lot of folks trying to make their mark?
Well, having a passion for the product that you make is probably the single most determining factor in how we innovate. So, many industries and businesses look for inspiration internally. Sometimes it happens externally. And you mentioned that there's been a tremendous surge, a lot of new breweries that have come onto the scene. And oftentimes you'll run into a beer or a style of beer that you've never seen before. And that somehow stimulates an internal desire to see what we could do or how we perhaps could spin a variation on that theme. So we do quite a bit of what we call research and development brews relative to innovation. And, for example, our 20th anniversary beer that we just released in draft at our party this past Saturday in Battle Creek is a blend of 4 different beers and 6 different bourbon barrels that these beers were aged in.
Wow.
So there's quite a bit of dimension that's happening today as it would relate to putting beers together, and that's quite different than it was 5-6 years ago. So there's a never-ending source of inspiration, particularly among the young people who we have in our team that keep looking to push the envelope in beer styles and flavors and aromas.
It is interesting because your business model, Larry Bell's business model, and so on have really caught the attention of educators who now have said there is a curricula here that we could be teaching, and they've started to do that. Was that something that you ever imagined would happen?
I don't think any of us probably could have possibly predicted the kind of pervasiveness that our industry has taken in our culture. And from an educational perspective, I'm really very pleased to see how that's evolved. For example, I've been blessed and privileged to have been asked to be a part of the advisory board for Western Michigan University and Kalamazoo Valley Community College's sustainable brewing program.
Mm-hmm.
And, they have a unique 2+2 program in which someone could start and get a 2-year brewing certificate at KBCC, and if they so chose, move on to receive a bachelor's in science of sustainable brewing from Western Michigan University. 5 years ago, that there might have been 1, 2, maybe 3 educational institutions throughout the country that had anything to do with brewing or the beer industry. And today, you've probably got at least 8 to 10 bona fide advanced educational opportunities for people that want to make this a career. So I'm thrilled, and actually for all of us in the industry, we're delighted to see that there is a pipeline and an effort to make knowledge and practical experience an integral part of the development of the industry as we move forward.
Mm-hmm. So before we go, I should give you a chance to talk about what's ahead. Anything you want to allude to at all about the future at Arcadia?
Well, we're just, again, we feel very privileged to have been a part of the Cereal City for 20 years. We are going to be releasing that 20th anniversary beer that we made that is a blend of 6 different barrel-aged beers. That beer is called Battle Creek, and the style of beer is called the Creek, K-R-I-E-K. So a little play on words there, but that'll be released at our Battle Creek facility in bottles, 750 milliliter bottles on the 17th of December for a special party that we're hosting. But we're just going to keep on being hopefully a valued anchor business in the west side of downtown Battle Creek. We look forward to another 20 years of being a part of the culture in the Cereal City. And again, we're going to keep focusing on a great quality product, a great quality experience when people come into either our Battle Creek facility or our Kalamazoo facility, and keep trying to be a better company and a better citizen in the communities that we're in.
Well, congratulations. 20 years is great, and I think probably you can stick with this profession and not go back to the other one.
Yeah, I think I'll take the beer industry over the paper industry any day.
Okay. Well, stay in touch, Tim. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Thanks for having me.
Tim Suprise, CEO, Arcadia Brewing, on WBCK.